All right, welcome back. Tertiary institutions are set to begin the academic year soon, but we've seen disruptive protests this week at universities such as Wits in Johannesburg. Among the issues in the spotlight are historical debt. The Minister of Higher Education, Science and Innovation, Dr. Nzimande, has announced Cabinet took a decision that funding would be reprioritized to address the National Student Financial Aid Scheme funding shortfall. I want to bring in now Lerato Fekisi. She's live for us in Gqeberha. Lerato, a very good morning to you. Let's just talk about some of the issues that students are facing. And you have a number of guests that are lined up as well to have this conversation, a wide-ranging conversation regarding student affairs.
A very good morning to you, Blaine. There might not be opening on universities tomorrow because students are planning a national shutdown. Now, Blaine, despite what we've heard that is just about the clearance of historic debt, the students also have a number of things that they want higher education to address. One, they want a zero increase of fees in 2021. They want their NSFAS funding to be paid by March. They want this academic year to be provided with laptops. They want to go back to universities. And this is just by some of the things that the students are outcrying for. But the real concern, Blaine, has been is that a few years ago there was this huge campaign called Fees Must Fall, where students were protesting and people thought that, you know what, this is going to be the catalyst of change that we are waiting for. Years later, you're having students all around the country planning a possible shutdown, Blaine, for what they call is just inequality in terms of student funding, and that is the concern. But joining me this morning to unpack exactly where the disjuncture is in terms of higher education is Pedro Mzileni, who is a sociologist. Pedro, you were there a few years ago and you were protesting over fees must fall. Years later, students are protesting over the same thing. There seems to be a disjuncture between what students are asking for, what is promised, and what's actually happening on the ground.
Yeah, thank you very much and good morning. I think the conversation generally on higher education and the university in the African continent as a whole is something that we need to look at a bit more carefully, because if indeed we are looking towards achieving the vision we set for the continent in 2030, which is to have an industrial economy in a prosperous continent, then investment on the youth should be the engine of that program. And by that, it refers me to free tertiary higher education. I think the investment on skills should be seen as an investment on the youth and also in the investment and development of the continent as a whole. And therefore, the African University comes into question around that. Instead of it being seen through the eyes or the lens of market fundamentalism, where it is an expense or a wastage or an expenditure. Rather, if it is seen as an investment in the youth, then I think as a policy priority, it would therefore become affordable and also part of the agenda of the state to fund higher education. Because at the moment, the reality is since 1994, the state generally has de-invested in higher education in real terms, and that has left universities with systematic and structural challenges, one of them being the fact that they now depend solely on student fees to generate a revenue for themselves, which has made them operate now with a commercial ideology. And if universities are going to base their sustainability metrics on student fees only, it therefore means that in the long term they are going to end up being totally unaffordable for the working class in this country. I mean, the latest report I came across says that the cost of completing a BA degree is now close to $500,000 in terms of cost. And this doesn't only refers to fees, but it refers to the entire value chain of student life on a daily basis, the living costs of being a student. Close to $500,000 to complete a BA degree in 2021, which has increased exponentially since 1994. And if half of the population lives in poverty, and over 80% of the population is part of the working class bracket, then it means the overwhelming majority of South African families will find higher education unaffordable. So if we continue with this model of higher education in the continent, then we're going to continue having this student protest unless a total restructuring and a reimagination of the higher education model that we use is turned around completely and made to be the state rather that finances higher education instead of depending on student fees.
And speaking of universities, like you're saying, there's so much focus saying that universities, the VCs are being paid exorbitant salaries, but you're saying now that the problem isn't really the universities. The real problem here is the government, because the same government has got money to fund SAA, and perhaps you're saying now these funds should be prioritized for education, which is more important priority in terms of meeting our 2013 goals.
I think students have raised a superior logic that no executive of the university or government has been able to comprehend at the moment. The students are basically questioning the colonial framework of these universities, whereby, firstly, in terms of their commercial ideologies, I've said they've been structured with a corporate framework where they're basically unaffordable for any working class family in this country. They also have deep-seated patriarchal tendencies within them, where there are instances of sexual violence and gender-based violence amongst women or students. Also, there are cognitive domination tendencies, where ideas from only one civilization are the ones that are being advanced in these universities, and also instances of racism as well. So all this entire value chain of oppression that students are facing in higher education is what is being raised and tagged around the concept of free education. And so if the state therefore sees young people as an asset for the future, it should restructure this funding model and also have these injustices.
Sorry to cut you there. We need to quickly go to KZN, but we'll definitely carry on this conversation. I think it's a much needed conversation to be had, especially at this time. We need to just quickly break and go to KZN, but it's a conversation, Blaine, we must carry on and will carry on because such an important topic right now, especially looking at the contest happening in the country. But for now, let's go to KZN.
Lerato, thank you very much indeed. Stand by. So from Gqeberha to Nongoma,